I think the most important part of all of this is about being authentic to yourself, essentially, and doing what you believe is the right thing to do in any scenario. And I think a lot of the time, people can sense that, feel that, see that. They can see when you're being kind of yourself versus
Mm.
when you're being a kind of an image of a leader that you've learned elsewhere. So I think kind of authentic leadership is super important in those types of scenarios. I think having a good understanding of what people's perception is also a big part of this. So being cognizant of the fact that you have your perception on the world, but everyone else has their perception on the world that is informed by their experience. And if you have there's this idea of essentially, so like to be able to think not only about your own kind of cognitive processes and ability, but also to think of what's going on for someone else at that particular moment, and to be able to differentiate those two things and say, this is my point of view on the decision I'm about to make. I haven't yet made it. Before I do, I'd like to hear your point of view. And that doesn't necessarily mean that point of view will always be, it will be taken into account. It won't always necessarily be, if it's a conflicting point of view, your role as a leader is to choose which of those two things you decide to move forward with. But I think that's the most effective way really in those scenarios is gather as much diverse information as you can about the setting you're making a decision in, but then ultimately make that decision on what you feel is the right thing to do based on the data in front of you and the intuitive data that you have through your own experiences, through having made decisions in the past, et cetera, et cetera. So it's this kind of gut instinct plus data. I
Yeah,
think that's the what you're trying to get to really with good leadership.
yeah. And do you think you have been able to do that, to make decisions based on your authentic values or principles and not basically soften them because of how it might be perceived or how
Mm,
somebody might be perceiving it and might even be communicating it with you, but to staying with your direction as a leader, your vision, and
mm.
then the values, which basically is the guardrails of what you do and what you don't do.
I would love to think that everything I've ever done has been the most authentic, perfectly aligned decision. I've made more mistakes than you could count. And I think that's, you try your best. You try to do what is the right thing to do. You try to do what's most authentic to you. There are lots of things in life that can pull you off course from that. There's loads of
Right.
deal, social, cultural, psychological factors always at play, right? There's a big thing which gets spoken a lot about in this field is like status, for example. Certainly within entrepreneurialism and that kind of world, there is what makes a kind of good entrepreneur to entrepreneurs, and then there's like what makes a good entrepreneur to everyone else. And there's this idea of kind of celebrating these big things sometimes, which to other people just shouldn't necessarily be celebrated. And I think that's always a tough thing because who's your audience? Who are you talking to? Who are you? What environment are you trying to make these decisions in? You have to take into account all these different things.